Thanks for having me, and thanks for making time today, and what a great room of folks to be in. I'm, like I mentioned before, Amy Kruse. I run a venture fund that's focused on mental health, brain health, and neurotechnology. I'm a neuroscientist myself by training, so I have a PhD in neuroscience and started my career actually at DARPA doing pretty crazy things in human enhancement. So why now? So as an investor, we often get faced with the question of like, what's changed, right? So we've heard about the brain's really hard. What's changed now? So I sort of categorize it into three things, from synapses to systems thinking, neurotech catches up with Moore's law, and neuroplasticity. So I think one of the things that, especially when I was in graduate school, very much a bottoms-up approach to neurotech. And I think now we're starting to understand the brain from a systems level perspective. We're starting to understand the circuitry. We're starting to understand, particularly in mental health, some of the things that vary across these spaces. So this is a graph from Leanne Williams' work showing heterogeneity in depression and anxiety and other things. And so now we're really starting to think about how we can actually parse these circuits down into things that can be modulated. And that's really important from the investment perspective, because when you start to think about actually going after a specific circuitry, you can actually, I think, get investors a little bit more excited. We're going to hear today probably from many people who are going to show us how Moore's law and neurotech have finally caught up with one another for a really long time. Like you showed earlier, there was a big, sort of giant room of neurotechnology that had to support these systems. We now are able to head mount these in really fantastic ways. Neuroplasticity, I focus a lot on non-invasive neuromodulation, and I think as it relates to the systems level work, we can now go in and modulate non-invasively or minimally invasively circuitry in the brain. This is really exciting, and I think we have yet to even explore how neurotechnology and intrinsic or enhanced neuroplasticity in the brain can really impact one another. So this is sort of my view of the, I call it brain health ecosystem. I see it from a hardware and devices, therapeutics, infrastructure, and diagnostics perspective. But remember, one of the most special things about neurotechnology is that it is a platform technology. So if we start looking at things in motor, or we start looking at things in mental health, we actually learn a lot that we can propagate through those, sort of transformative layers. So while I'm initially focused on mental health, it certainly impacts neurodegeneration, some of the things that we're talking about in stroke, as well as cognition and eventually enhancement or human performance. We are looking at, again, this is my funder's perspective, we're looking at a massive opportunity here, right? I often, unfortunately, get folks asking me if this is not a small or niche area. No, this is not a small or niche area. This is easily trillions and trillions of dollars of capital that are accessible. This is a study that came out from Naveen Rao, who runs the Neurotech Futures. He did the 2024 assessment of the capital going into this space, $2.3 billion. This is a drop in the bucket compared to what was spent in AI last year, which PitchBook estimates at about $130 billion. So we have a little bit of work to go in the neurotech space to capitalize on this and to bring additional capital into this space. But one of the things that's happening, and this is outside of just our neurotech world, is this conversation around brain capital. So folks are now reframing the conversation around the brain, not just in terms of clinical outcomes, but in terms of how it intersects with workforce and sort of the building of future communities and future workforce and all of those things pulled together. So trying to pull that up, to even a 30,000 foot or 100,000 foot layer on the global scale. So the Davos Alzheimer's Collective is part of this. The World Economic Forum, McKinsey are part of this. Additionally, Texas actually this year is voting on in November something they call DPRIT, which is the Dementia Prevention Research Initiative of Texas. I'm starting to get that down, which is about $3 billion worth of capital that over a 10-year period that's going to go into that space. We're hoping that they interpret dementia prevention very broadly in that sense, but this just gives you an idea of sort of the capital that's starting to move in these areas. Of course, we have all the emergent themes that we've been talking about today and will talk about today. I will say it's probably never been a better time to start a neurotech company. It's also a really challenging time as we think about what's happening at the NIH NIH and some of the fundamental R&D that's really being whacked at right now. And so, so it's one of the reasons why we as a community have been having much larger discussions about how to attract capital into this space, not just through venture capital, but also philanthropic or other focused research organizations and things like that. I like to end with big challenges. So I think one of the things that excites capital in this space, and again, this is a conversation that we've been having, are really big picture ideas, right? So a lot of these things seem like science fiction to investors, and it's our job to communicate to investors that a lot of these things are much more near term than they think. So a lot of people are like, oh, that'll take 25 years for that to happen. And you're like, no. That's going to happen in a 5 to 10 year period. So that's whether that's invasive brain-computer interfaces, sleep augmentation, which is one of my favorite topics. And I think one thing that investors will continue to get excited about in terms of the ability to induce or modulate sleep and sleep states in a very reasonable time frame. Non-invasively and potentially invasively as well. Precision psychiatry, the things that we've been talking around circuit modulation. I think, you'll hear a little bit more about that, either today or in some of the working groups. And then, of course, neurodegenerative disorders. We've sort of seen some really drastic numbers around Alzheimer's disease. And I actually believe that if we do our job right as neurotechnologists, it will be preventable, not something that's inevitable. So that's my spiel. Hopefully that gave you some exciting things to think about, and I'm happy to take any questions and obviously talk with folks today.
Thank you so much.
So if you can let me play the devil's advocate here.
Absolutely.
And please disagree with me. Genetics, we discovered the DNA structure. Now we have synthetic stuff. There's a real technology. There's a real industry. Computer science, Moore's law, we knew exactly what we need to do, make smaller transistors. And the technology came in. In biology, neuroscience, I haven't seen that yet. We don't know what the neural code is. We just heard more electrodes is better. We have neuropixels, right? We have more electrodes. Elon Musk, what he's doing, he's replicating studies from like 20 years ago. So the question, that's the intro, the question is, do you see in the companies that are emerging someone who actually has the potential to become a unicorn company, someone who actually has a product that can bring money in? Because everything that I have seen up until now is science projects.
Yes. Yeah. So I do see that there are those unicorn companies that are out there. I do believe it is going to be around state modulation, whether that is sleep, whether that's mood, affect, cognition, something like that. I do think that when we actually get into the space of actually being able to modulate the brain in a very transformative way, I think that will be very standout. And I think it could be something that also crosses over the threshold from clinical, which I believe most of these things will be clinical, to start into something around human enhancement.
I'm going to generalize the last comment. My experience, sorry,
That's
I was handed the
That's
mic,
okay.
so
No worries. I was like,
I'm
where are
so
you?
excited. I want to generalize the last comment. My experience, for example, in AI is that there's a lot of disinterest, but there's a lot of people like, yeah, maybe, who knows what's possible, that you say it's true in funding. My experience is that in the neuroscience community, you're talking about the most conservative, the people who think the least is possible. And so, I'm just giving you my experiences,
I
right?
deeply appreciate that.
And so
actually,
the question then becomes, these are the experts in the field, explain that, please.
I don't know how to explain it. I can only try to perhaps cheerlead and drag people. I mean, I think we need a transformative moment in the community. I think if we want to attract capital at the size that we're seeing now, right, for other things like AI and other hyperscaling things, robotics is a great example. I think we need to up our game. I think we need to call some shots and set some bold vision. That's my answer.
Use this workshop to do it, please.
I'm going to be obnoxious and answer David. The reason why neuroscientists are very conservative is because they're budget and personnel and timeline constrained. And so they've been trained all their career to think small. Not all academics, but many. And if you talk, Alan, I think Alan's a neuroscientist. Did that sound small to you? I think talk to people who are at the border of academic and neurotech who understand what happens when you go to industry or what happens when you marshal big resources at something like a focused research organization, and you'll hear a very different tone.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Awesome.